Welcome to the November episode of International Voices. I am your host and moderator, Udo Fluck, and I have the honor to oversee the Office of Global and Cultural Affairs in Arts Missoula. This is the 10th podcast this year. We started in February. To listen to the 9 previous episodes, please visit artsmissoula.org, click on Global and Cultural Affairs, and visit Radio and Podcasts. International Voices is a monthly podcast brought to you by Global and Cultural Affairs of Arts Missoula and The Trail 1033. My International Voices guest in this November episode is Brigitta Miranda-Freer, the Executive Director of the Montana World Trade Center and the Director of Operations for the Montana Technology Enterprise Center, or short MonTec, a technology incubator. Prior to her current roles, Brigitta served as Director of Business Development for Missoula's Economic Partnership and Membership Manager for the Montana World Trade Center. Brigitta holds undergraduate degrees in International Affairs and Spanish Latin American Area Studies from the American University in Washington, D.C., and an MBA from the University of Montana. And it is a pleasure to visit with her today. Welcome, Brigitta. Brigitta, when did you start as the Executive Director of the Montana World Trade Center?
Gosh, I think it was 2014-ish. You know, Udo, we're recording this in the middle of a pandemic, and I tell you that time seems very fluid right now. So I think it's been a number of years, believe it or not.
What is the mission of the Montana World Trade Center?
Yeah, our mission centers firmly on international trade capacity building. So, you know, we've been around for over 25 years now. So not only do we have, do we serve as Montana's institutional authority on international trade, but we also know how to positively impact that really on a grassroots level. And our work falls into 3 main buckets. You might want to ask me about that. I don't know. Is that coming up?
It is. As a matter of fact, I have the bucket list.
Great. Well, this may be different than other bucket lists, but in terms of our work that we undertake at the Trade Center, it falls into 3 main buckets. First, one-on-one technical assistance that we provide to businesses in relation to their international trade endeavors, whether that's import, export, etc.
Right.
So second bucket is ongoing international trade education. So helping businesses to understand the very basics into some more technical kinds of education, such as, how do you handle exports if you've got a product that is subject to export licensing? That could be anything from software to more fun things like beer or
right.
Some of our craft brews in state.
Sure.
So, and then that third bucket is really an all-encompassing one that has to do with the strategic initiatives that we create and then execute that are designed to move the needle in the right direction for Montana's international trade portfolio. So we may talk a little bit more about those, but just as an example, we do trade missions at the Montana World Trade Center where we're taking groups of businesses, well, in pre-pandemic time, so right. We'll talk about how that's playing out, where we take groups of businesses overseas to establish some key relationships with international distributors that we hope will help them expand their operations internationally.
Right.
We undertake strategic initiatives such as the Foreign Direct Investment Initiative for the state of Montana. So, right. What is Montana's business case, industry-specific business case to attract foreign direct investment? So we've actually done quite a bit of work on that over the last couple of years, and we'll continue on that. And I'm happy to get into the weeds on that if you'd like, but you may have some other questions for me.
Sure. No, this is great, I think, as an overall mission and the services that you provide. But I'm sure there are lots of small and medium-sized businesses, and some of them, some business owners might even listen to this podcast. How do you specifically assist those small and medium-sized businesses across Montana?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, the businesses that we work with are predominantly SMEs, or small and medium-sized enterprises, because that's what exists in Montana.
Right.
And Udo, you and I know this because we're in state here, but there may be only a handful of businesses in this state that actually are large enough to have dedicated international departments. So
Right.
by and large, these SMEs are trying to figure out international market opportunities with the staff that they have, right? So we act as an on-call extension to sales and marketing teams or business development teams for SMEs across Montana in various industries. And then sometimes those clients know exactly where in the world they want to go with their product or service. And it's just a matter of having some on-call technical assistance or on-call project management assistance to help track down the right information so that they can make an informed decision. Like, what's the regulatory landscape look like in country? What trade shows are coming up that I should be aware of? Who are some, decent looking importer and distributor candidates, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a matter of providing that information to them, and then they take it and they move on it. Sometimes the businesses that we work with, have no idea where in the world they should go with their product or service first. And they may just be beginning to think about that. So one thing that we do often is put together an export market ranking matrix for companies like that really just helps them put some numbers and some more quantifiable data to that decision-making process. So, I'm actually just finishing up a fall practicum at the University of Montana on international business for SMEs, basically. This is a World Trade Center practicum.
Right.
I just was working with our students on doing an export market ranking matrix for a firm that is a local Montana manufacturer. They pivoted with the advent of the pandemic to making PPE, so personal protective equipment, and we were helping them figure out market opportunity for that type of product outside of the United States based on various criteria that we kind of set at the start in conjunction with the business. So,
Okay.
think of us as that on-call extension of your sales and marketing or business development team that's dedicated specifically to international matters.
Great. No, I think that gives people a pretty good idea on what it is that you provide, from basically the beginning stages or the earliest stages of planning all the way through this entire process.
Sure.
Now, you just mentioned that you are teaching a class at the University of Montana. Your office is also located on the University of Montana campus. What is the connection between the Montana World Trade Center and the University of Montana, and what are some of the advantages to being housed on the campus?
Well, so the Montana World Trade Center is actually a World Trade Center like 300 plus around the globe. I think there are 320 World Trade Centers in 100 countries around the globe.
Right.
So this is an organization that's headquartered out of New York. And this particular World Trade Center, the license for it is owned by the University of Montana.
Ah, okay.
So that's how we came to be affiliated with the University of Montana. And as I said a little bit earlier on, that was over 25 years ago.
Right.
And so that's the connection. And, advantages of being housed on campus, well, absolutely. Let's see if I can prioritize these. I don't know, but I'll tell you as they come to mind for me right now. First of all, of course, the University of Montana provides just a mighty platform for this World Trade Center to be impactful in our endeavors, which are often kind of boil down to economic development kind of undertakings. I don't think people realize, outside of the economic impact of football games, and thankfully research at the University of Montana is finally getting due credit, but there is an amazing impact that organizations like the Montana World Trade Center and some of my other collegial organizations at have. The Montana World Trade Center is part, at the University of Montana, is part of this continuum of organizations that are all designed to support entrepreneurs and businesses across the state. So just to give you a little bit more feedback on that, I mean, we've got everything from Launchpad, which is, encourages startup ideation. The
Right.
University of Montana also houses the Small Business Development Center for our community. That helps small businesses of all kinds, to either establish operations, grow operations, figure out how to pivot operations in the middle of a pandemic. The Procurement and Technical Assistance Center is housed at the University of Montana. As I said, Montana World Trade Center is a part of this continuum too, with our focus being typically on later stage companies, well, not brand new baby startups,
Right. Right.
helping them find markets outside the U.S.
Right.
And so, I mean, I love being a part of that continuum of support, and I think it makes a lot of sense. The
Sure.
university puts a lot of funding behind this effort, and
Right.
I appreciate that, and I think the clients that we all collectively serve definitely appreciate having those resources available.
And I would think that in addition to being physically located on campus and having the support of the university, it's also of an advantage to students if
Absolutely.
they would like to sort of learn more, find out more about international trade and the work that you do. Do you offer internships to students?
I do, and thank you for saying that. I actually wrote it down, and then I failed to mention it in my comments there. It's not only do we work with with University of Montana
Right.
students every semester. In a typical year, at any point in time, I'd say we have 4 to 6 kind of high-powered interns that are working with us at the Montana World Trade Center. So there are various roles that they fulfill. They help us with research for companies. There is a vast amount of information that's available out there. Certainly no one could dispute that. But what becomes a challenge now is parsing that information and going to trusted sources to pull together information that you're comfortable with, that you feel adds value for your client and can help them make an informed decision. So we teach students how to do that in a manner that is effective, because you can spend many hours going down many rabbit holes. So
Sure.
we actually part of this practicum that I teach, and just anytime we've got researchers coming on board, I help them to understand those places that we go all the time for information and what constitutes pieces of information of most value to our clients. And also, Udo, we work with interns to help us with things like pulling together our many events throughout the year. We've got
Right.
Trade education events. We often are doing events in conjunction with inbound consuls general. Maybe we'll even talk about that a little bit later. But just to kind of wrap up this thought, on our Montana World Trade Center website, which is MWTC.org, we actually have a little section there on internships. So there's some videos that I've put together about what it means to be an intern, and actually some interviews with some of our former interns, which not only come from Montana and and in-state here and from the United States, but we have a number of interns that have worked at the Trade Center over the years that are international students, and we love that. We love the perspective that they bring on, from their home country, particularly when we're undertaking research activities on behalf of clients. And we just love the opportunity that it presents for, students maybe that have never left Montana. And gee, Udo, right now in navigating this pandemic, maybe we can't leave this year. So this is, an opportunity to have some engagement with folks from another part of the world that I think is so mutually beneficial and really enriches not only the experience for the students, but the work product that we provide to our clients.
Right. No, and I'm glad you're saying that, because I think it's of such high value for students that are interested in pursuing a career in international business or in international management or whatever it may be, to have this opportunity to not only learn about these things in a theoretical classroom setting in a lecture where somebody talks about it and tells people this is what it would be like, but for students to actually be able to, wet their feet, to actually go into this and to be involved in a project or help create something that aids your office in doing its job, and then also learn about the obstacles, the challenges that are there, so that students understand that this is something that they would deal with or would have to deal with if they were going in that field. So really this practical experience, I think that's a really neat thing that your office offers, that in addition to the services that you are offering to small and medium-sized businesses across Montana.
Right. And I think you have a fair amount of students in your audience. So just to clarify, there are ongoing internship opportunities on many fronts at the Trade Center, whether it's research or helping with our events and being a part of that and getting to do some networking there. And this kind of separate thing, but it kind of underpins what we do at the Trade Center, this practicum that I developed and teach every fall actually gives students the opportunity to work on projects for businesses specifically, actual work product for businesses. And Udo, we do cover a number of different topics that it's sort of my, this is how I categorize it as everything I wish I knew when I started my career in international business, and maybe didn't. So,
sure.
I mean, we cover the basics from the perspective of a small business trying to do business internationally, right? I think a lot of our textbooks really focus on the large multinationals and how they do it. And I'm not discounting that. That's, a very important part of our economy. However, small businesses need to know how to do this too. And they need to know how to do it in a manner that's going to add to their bottom line rather than inadvertently, negatively impact that bottom line. So we cover things like, how do you actually establish viable long-term relationships with distributors? Hey, how do you mitigate your payment risk? How do you get paid?
Right.
What do you do if you hear this from your distributor? So
sure.
I actually, I'll probably am talking too much about this class, but I love it because it's based entirely on real world experience.
No, and I really appreciate that, because you are right. We do have quite a few students that are connecting to International Voices on a regular basis. So those might be students that because of their interest in listening to an internationally themed podcast might also be interested in learning more about an internship, or they know other students, friends of theirs, that are interested in that kind of thing and that have done a study abroad program or whatever. You never know how these things are interconnected and how the word travels, but it's just good to know that the Montana World Trade Center at the University of Montana campus does not only service those small and medium-sized businesses, but is also providing a great service of practical experience for students that are at the university. So that's perfect.
Absolutely. We couldn't do it without them.
Yes. Now, the Montana World Trade Center is a membership organization. Could you tell us a little more about the membership levels, Brigitta, and the benefits that those membership levels offer to organizations and businesses?
Sure. So we actually just restructured our membership, and I would tell you there is a great little section of our website, again, at MWTC.org, that has all our different levels, but we've got about a half a dozen different levels of membership. They range in price from $5,000 to $300, and we actually do have student membership for $100 a year. But just in general, Udo, our memberships for SMEs are largely geared towards providing a certain level of technical assistance for free. They have opportunities to have discounts on our training that we offer, and they also have opportunities to kind of be the first parties on board with any of our outbound trade missions or inbound trade missions that we may be hosting. So there is literally about a page and a half of copy in relation to our membership. So I probably won't go through them all, but one that I wanted to talk about, because we actually just added it, that might be of interest to you and your listeners. We just added a global trade entrepreneur membership, and this one is geared to Montana's immigrant and refugee entrepreneurs. So,
okay.
You and I both know what an incredible contribution immigrants make to our business ecosystem, our cultural ecosystem, our ecosystem in general here in Montana.
Sure, absolutely.
And immigrants in general are highly entrepreneurial, and there actually have been a number of different studies on this. So, we recognize that there are a lot of people here that are planting roots in Montana, and they are interested in starting a business, and they may just want to have an organization that can help them to become connected and really clearly values the fact that they have come from elsewhere in the world and they have chosen to be here. So sure. I encourage you to check that out. I'm excited about that, and we'll see what it means in terms of new business formation in our community.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned earlier when we were starting out, Brigitta, that the Montana World Trade Center is part of a much larger network. Can you tell us a little more about the World Trade Center organization in general, and about the satellite offices across the country? And I think you mentioned a number that was like over 300 of these satellite operations that exist.
Yep. So it might be a little redundant, but there are over 300, and I think the number is 320 World Trade Centers in 100 countries around the globe.
Right.
So actually, World Trade Centers are, I would say, far more prolific in places like India and China, and even in South America, maybe, than they are here in the U.S. It's interesting to me. But all of these organizations, I guess the way that I collaborate with most of my colleagues, two manners. Number one, in providing the direct technical assistance to businesses, if part of that assistance they're requesting is, hey, please help us understand what the business climate looks like in country for our product or service. Who do I need to be looking at partnering with in country? Questions like that. the World Trade Center network is very handy in being able to call up if we're on the same time zone, or arrange for a Zoom chat, or email,
Right.
and just get some feedback that is on the ground, very knowledgeable, with a business-centric kind of background to it. There are definitely some government services that we can and do call on when we cast our wide net of getting information, but I really appreciate having that private sector perspective. So that's helpful. And then the other thing that we do that I love, and we're starting to house more and more of this information, is the Montana World Trade Center puts on educational events relating to international business all the time. Not just the how-tos, but things like the USMCA, U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, which is basically NAFTA 2.0, is now in effect, right? So what does that mean for you and your business? We've partnered with other World Trade Centers on offering educational opportunities in relation to that. So I love there's just a very rich tapestry of educational opportunities that are provided by World Trade Centers around the globe, and we love to be able to tap into that to get that on the ground private sector perspective. I'm kind of advocating now for the organization to begin housing a library of resources like this. So
nice.
We'll see if that works out. But for now, what I do is I call on my World Trade Center partners that I know are very active in this space, and see what they've got going on, see how we can partner on events. I referenced that USMCA event, and the last one that we did was back in the spring. I think we're going to end up doing another one here pretty soon, as businesses finally realize that, hey, we're going to need to be changing documents, and things are changing for real now. That one we partnered with 3 other World Trade Centers. So we had representation on that call from not only the United States, but Canada and Mexico. And I just thought that was great, not only in terms of how informed the speakers were, but the perspective of businesses from all of those different places being all together in that one session. I thought was pretty valuable.
Wonderful. No, and I would think that collaborating with World Trade Centers in other countries must be a very interesting experience, because you learn about local issues in other countries.
Yep.
And how they may connect to a larger international challenge that needs to be tackled. So I'm pretty sure it's very rewarding to be in close contact with those other satellite operations around the world.
Yeah, I just actually had a call. Other World Trade Centers, this pandemic hit Europe before it hit the United States. So I actually got some really interesting feedback from some of our colleagues in WTC Gibraltar, of all places, as they put together a really comprehensive kind of package of information to help entities running, commercial real estate. How do you get ready for this? Anyway, some of those protocols we had in place and began using early on, so that was helpful.
Great. Now, thanks for sharing that with us, because it's oftentimes when you have a local organization, or what seems to be a local organization, but upon closer inspection, one actually finds out that it is connected to some organization that is much larger, either nationally or even internationally, and that the local office may just be sort of the storefront that you see, but that there is a whole big international apparatus behind it that allows for all kinds of interesting and educational opportunities that one might not think looking at the storefront, because it's not really clear that there is this larger apparatus behind it. So thanks for illuminating that a little bit.
Oh yeah, thanks for asking. Hey, I think that this something similar can be said for so many of us living in Montana, right? I mean, it's very interesting to hear the backstories of people that have come here from other places.
Oh, absolutely.
We have a lot of very high-powered people that are here by choice, which is great for us as a state. But sometimes they're here kind of living and working under the radar, so we don't realize the depth of expertise and maybe the good fortune that we have to have all these people here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many people I have run into over the last 30 years that were extremely humble, and what you just said, they really sort of downplayed the fact that they had this great experience and training, or skill building, professional experience somewhere else, and then they came to Montana, or specifically to Missoula, and all you know is that's John,
right?
And you don't know anything else about John, other than that he's probably a nice guy, but then that fits for many. But that only because you really have this deeper conversation, you find out that that there is this huge story behind this person, and you kind of wonder how and why did they end up in Missoula, Montana. But you're absolutely right. It adds to this rich fabric of people that we have here that I think make this community what it is. Absolutely. And it's pretty interesting that it's like a magnet, and these interesting characters come in and enrich our community with their experience and their talent.
Udo, since you mentioned that, I think that's another important thing about being in a university community, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we are here, because we have this university in our community, we do have the benefit of pulling in people from around the country and around the world that really probably wouldn't have been here otherwise. It brings in more culture in addition to that incredible depth of expertise. And I've said it many times before, Missoula is a community with maybe 80,000 people-ish in it. We punch well above our weight class, and we owe a lot of that to the fact that we've got this university here. Right. Yeah.
And while we are straying a little bit from our original focus of this podcast and the questions, but I absolutely agree with you. And the other thing that fascinates me is the fact that so many people, when you then get to know them, say, oh, in my previous life, I was doing this and that. And you go, wow, you were actually nice to talk to. From just what I know, I didn't even know there was this interesting previous life that you had. I specifically have an experience that I can share with you quickly. I met a person and talked with them about certain advice that I needed, and come to find out that while this person is an attorney now, was actually a very an exquisite chef in a previous life, and has cooked dinners for Princess Diana and Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones, and I don't know who else. But that's sort of one of those examples of you just kind of go, what? And you live in Missoula? How does that all work out? But
well, although I just cooked dinner for Mick Jagger yesterday. No, I'm kidding. I can't get rid of that guy.
Right. Well, he's actually, he has become a close friend of me and my family. And so we actually we're benefiting from this chef experience, because every so often he cooks for us. So it all worked out, Brigitta, is what I'm saying.
Very nice. Yeah.
No, but going back to our topic, and that is the Montana World Trade Center, and I'm talking to Brigitta Miranda-Freer, who is the executive director of the Montana World Trade Center. Now, you have this trade center, but the trade center, and you oversee that trade center, but you also have a relationship to and with MonTec, which is this incubator here in town that is also a part of the University of Montana. And what is your connection to MonTec? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And while since your audience may know you as the hat guy, Udo, I'll tell you that you're not the only person in Montana that wears many hats. So many of us do. So
Right.
yes, while I'm the executive director of Montana World Trade Center, MWTC also oversees operations at MonTec, which is the Montana Technology Enterprise Center,
Right.
otherwise known as the tech incubator that's across the river from the University of Montana. It's right next to Missoula College River campus. So,
Right.
And that role for me, I think felt very comfortable because, as I talked a little bit about earlier in our conversation, other World Trade Centers do have a real estate component to them. So in addition to providing the types of trade services, trade capacity building services that I talked about, they also own and operate buildings, and they house multiple different types of entities that may be doing business internationally or maybe facilitating international business, like banks and attorneys and you name it. So from my perspective, when I see the MonTec operation, not only is it of interest to me to kind of roll up my sleeves and see what maybe we can do as an organization to assist some of the businesses that are there and taking root. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I think you wanted to talk about the bioscience firms. But it was also of interest to me because I think, well, at some point, I would love to actually have a physical incarnation of this one-stop shop concept.
Right.
And how does that fit into the larger kind of landscape of what may even become something like an innovation corridor in that part of town?
Sure.
So I said, yeah, I'm interested in taking on that role. I'd like to learn a bit more about kind of operations in that building, how we can maximize it to help crank out businesses that are creating jobs, making more capital investments in our community. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of a long-term play for me, but with the short-term benefit of having the opportunity to kind of roll up my sleeves and work with some other team members to assist some of the firms that are in that building.
Right. Now, just for those people that don't know much about MonTec, MonTec is an incubator, which basically means it gives startups an opportunity to root and to begin their operation. And many of them have actually, after they were incubated, have been very successful outside of MonTec. Is that correct?
We've got a couple right now that are really interesting, and particularly in light of the pandemic. I mean, nothing underscores the need for a robust bioscience ecosystem in our state and in the nation like a pandemic. So I'll tell you that our building, the technology incubator, is completely full right now, and we are trying to figure out how to expand so that we can have more space to assist not only those firms, but other firms that are coming out of the University of Montana or the Montana University system in general, or just wanting to commercialize technology that would require wet lab space. So the two well, it's not just two, but the two that are kind of probably good examples of businesses that seem to be on this hockey stick trajectory of growth are Inimmune. Now, Inimmune is a company that was started by Jay Evans and partners, and Jay Evans actually has a dual appointment. He runs the Center for Translational Medicine at the University of Montana, and is faculty at UM, and also runs Inimmune. So Inimmune, boy, I would do them a tremendous disservice if I were trying to explain to you everything that they're into, but suffice to say, early stage research and development in relation to vaccines. So
Okay.
not only are they working on a vaccine that would help us hopefully create a pathway to the end of our opioid epidemic in this nation, but they are also working on really exciting things right now in relation to, pandemic response, COVID-19 response. I mean, I think that the NIH actually just provided a very large round of funding to the Center for Translational Medicine and Inimmune. Now, Udo, don't quote me, but I believe it was to the tune of about $30 million. They also just raised a similar amount of capital from Two Bear Capital, which is our very first VC firm in state that with focus on bioscience firms and AI. So
that is impressive. That is very impressive.
Yeah, and Inimmune is just, they're growing like crazy. So we're working with them to try to figure out how to accommodate that growth
Wonderful.
in the near term and in the long term.
Right. Now, isn't there another company, I seem to remember, Fire Diagnostics?
Yep. Was just going to talk about Fire, F-Y-R.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, and so they are involved. So Inimmune more on the vaccine side, and then Fire on the diagnostic side, right? In relation to COVID-19 anyway. So their technology allows them to do testing in relation to COVID-19. And again, my apologies to everyone out there at Fire. I'm not getting very technical on this, but both of these firms have seen large infusions of capital over the last couple of years, not just from the federal government through SBIR, so Small Business Innovative Research, and STTR, which I believe is Small Business Technology Transfer grant funding, but also from the private sector. So we love what we're seeing there. Both of these firms are expanding quite a bit. There are many others. There's just so many cool stories in the MonTec building itself.
That is neat.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that a lot of them actually need to begin thinking about their engagement in international, and I'll use, whether it's eventually selling products outside of the U.S. or partnering with major pharma outside of the U.S. to help bring their products to fruition. So, yeah, it's been interesting.
Very nice. Now, what impact has this pandemic had on the Montana World Trade Center, its services, and your programming?
None, Udo. I don't know what everybody's complaining about. It seems great. Everything is just business as usual. Well, yeah. So we are.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm sorry. I'm being so a wise guy there, but well, we, as every other business, as every other organization, are trying to navigate just decisions in an incredibly dynamic time. There's always some element to that when you're leading an organization, but this, pandemics just kick it up to a whole new level because, we're all just trying to figure things out on the fly. So, I mean, practically speaking, well, I can tell you that the first part of 2020 was a little sad for me because I did things like spent the first couple months unwinding events such as a trade mission to Ireland, our 25th anniversary celebration, a couple different trainings that we had lined up, participation at Select USA Investment Summit, which is our nation's foremost foreign direct investment summit in DC. So I spent the first couple months of the year unwinding that. So all of that was not going to happen in the same form as it could before. So we, like everybody else, pivoted as quickly as we could to doing what we could virtually. And I think some things work out better than others. We're
Sure.
still trying to figure out, trade missions are geared to bringing people together literally.
Right.
So the virtual format is very challenging. I did participate in a virtual trade mission, Bio International, in relation to some work that we're doing with the Bioscience Cluster Initiative, so messaging about Montana's case for bioscience for foreign direct investment. So we may touch on that. But I participated in this trade show over the summer, and I had a few meetings, but boy, it is just not the same.
Right.
So have you ever been to a trade show yourself? I mean, I imagine so.
Yes.
I mean, so you go there and you prepare in advance, well in advance, hopefully, and you're scheduling some very targeted meetings. It's a convenient meeting place for, players in your industry in general. So you can get a lot done in a short period of time with scheduled meetings. And then you have the benefit of those sort of serendipitous collisions that normally happen when you're just there.
Right.
And boy, none of that happens. I have yet to figure out the whole serendipitous collision thing on the virtual platform. Have you?
No, you're absolutely right. I think many things can be done virtually, and I think we all have proven in the last 3 quarters of a year that we have pivoted and that we have figured out ways of continuing our work. And in some cases, it may even have increased, or the services have gotten broader because of the element of technology being there. But some activities are really focused on human life interaction.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, and no matter, what kind of a platform you're using or what kind of an equipment you have to tele or video conference, it's just not the same. And I would absolutely agree with you that some of these things are hard to pull off, especially when it is about sort of an organic connection with people and fostering a conversation that then leads to something else. And then somebody walking by says, hey, I just overheard that. That's interesting. And this has been my experience. As you would with a real sort of live interaction with people, when you do that on a Zoom call, I think a lot of this is not serendipitous. Like you said, it's not, because it can't be. And I think that's a big hurdle that we're probably all struggling with. And I don't know if there is an answer and if we will find one during, the pandemic, but I totally agree with you. A lot of these experiences, I would agree. I have gone through the same.
Well, I guess we can also look at it in the other way, in that I say this kind of flippantly, but we're all the same size on Zoom, right?
Right.
So
right.
I guess if we look at it in that manner, it's not like Montana, or we from Montana, or our organizations are at an incredible disadvantage because no one is traveling in person right now, right? So the work that we're trying to do, or when we're talking, for example, about making the case for foreign direct investment in Montana, some of those relationships may well just be started virtually at this point, knowing that, again, no one else, regardless of the size of their budget, is really undertaking to travel right now. We really can't. We're still on travel restrictions. So there's that. I've got an event coming up in early December. I think December 3rd is what we've got targeted. And it's the Montana-Israel Virtual Trade Forum. So we're going to see how that goes. We are partnering on that one with the Israeli Consul General and his innovation team, as well as the Federation of Israeli Chambers of Commerce on the other end. So this is kind of audacious. So we're thinking about a we'll have an opening session, then we're going to have, I think, 2 or 3 breakouts,
Right.
and then come back with a call to action that will include us on the Montana side, we at the Montana World Trade Center on the Montana side, and the Israeli Chambers of Commerce on the other side, facilitating follow-up B2B meetings. So I'll let you know how it goes. The whole event's going to be 90 minutes, and I think the content's exciting, and I know that the speakers are going to be very exciting, and I just hope that the technology helps us to convey those things rather than inhibits us. We'll see.
Right. But what a beautiful segue, Brigitta, because one of my few questions left are what is your upcoming programming for November and December? So that was a perfect segue into that. Is there anything else that programming-wise you would like us to know that is either happening this next month or before the end of the year?
Yeah, so a couple other things, and unfortunately I can't be firm on the dates for them, but the other one that's coming up is something that we're working on with the Montana Bioscience Cluster Initiative, which we're a partner for the Montana Bioscience Cluster Initiative. We didn't really talk about that, and it's kind of beyond the scope of this, but we're working with JETRO, so the Japanese External Trade Organization, to actually do a virtual session geared towards helping Montana bioscience firms to expand into international markets vis-a-vis partnerships, and looking at how JETRO may be able to facilitate that. So more to come on that. I mean, we'll have it posted on our website when we get firm on a date. We're also trying to, before the end of the year, we have been working with the Bureau of Business and Economic Research for the last couple of months to do our first ever but annual International Trade and Investment Survey for Montana. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's been a big undertaking and has really stretched the limitations I have on my ability to put together lists and make sure everything's where it needs to be, and
Sure.
the logistics of it are surprisingly challenging. But what we're endeavoring to do with this is get a better sense of just more granular detail from Montana's exporters, Montana's importers, and firms in Montana that have foreign direct investments. So kind of 3 buckets there. I don't know, I can't remember if you and I have talked about this or not, but it's, when you look at Montana's trade statistics in general, they don't really tell the whole story of Montana. And you got to be careful, because sometimes they don't tell an entirely true story of Montana either.
Correct.
It's strange, but depending on how you search, for the last few years, you would find that tobacco and cigarette products are #1 export from Montana, a #1 Montana export product, which is crazy because Montana sure isn't a tobacco growing state. So, you really have to peel back the layer of the onions to understand what was happening there and why that was happening. And has to do with Mexican cigarette manufacturing companies staging some product in Montana before then exporting it to Canada. We'll talk about that another time, but it just kind of one of those stories that brings to light the fact that, okay, we're not telling our entire story, or maybe we're not even telling it correctly if we're just offering up the trade stats that are easily pulled, like from U.S. Census information. So
right.
We wanted to drill down a little bit further, understand better where our companies that are engaged in export are exporting to, and this is across industries. If they're importing and they have a trading relationship there, what country that is with. We want to understand a little bit more about, how many people do they employ? What kinds of wages are they paying? Because generally speaking, firms that are exporting are actually paying their employees a little bit better than non-exporting firms. And I think that stat is available on export.gov. So we just wanted to understand a little bit better about where in the world they're sending their product or their service, what's working well, do they see opportunities for growth, not only for their firm, but potentially for other Montana firms. If they have foreign direct investment, where has that come from? And then also we asked them a little bit about, the impact of trade policy, right, over the course of the current administration. And again, we're going to do this every year. So it's an audacious undertaking. It's the first time that anyone is trying to do this.
Sure.
But we think that's going to be wrapped up, Udo, by the end of November, we hope. The Bureau of Business and Economic Research is helping us to analyze that data. And then we hope to share information broadly about that.
Nice.
Montana is engaged in the international trade ecosystem, whether we know it or not.
Right. Now that brings me to my last question, Brigitta, and that is, what are your or the Montana World Trade Center's goals for the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, 5-year planning is particularly challenging with the pandemic. But
right.
But that said, I keep going back to my business model canvas, and we will continue to be the institutional knowledge of Montana's international trade portfolio, and developing more information that will help to describe that to all those who would care to understand. And then, we'll continue delivering services and spearheading initiatives that impact Montana's international trade in a positive fashion. We'll focus quite a bit on implementation of our international trade and investment strategy over the next couple of years, and hoping to maximize results there. We'll continue work in partnership with the Montana Bioscience Cluster Initiative to help that particular industry grow in our state, and our role there will be messaging to the world about Montana's expertise, infrastructure, and overall talent pool available to that industry. And then of course we'll continue on with our everyday activities, the one-on-one technical assistance that's customized for businesses, the trade education, right, on everything from the how-to hey, how do you build your regulated export strategy?
Sure.
It's not sexy, but it's important.
Right.
And it makes a difference.
Great. Well, thank you, Brigitta. This was most informative, and I'm always amazed how fast an hour goes by when you have an interesting person to talk to and you learn about an interesting program and services that are offered. So I thank you for your time and wish you all the best in these difficult times. But thanks for sharing the November and December sort of activities that you have. And of course, for more information, and you laced it throughout the interview, people can go to your website, correct?
Yep, MWTC.org.
Wonderful. Brigitta, all the best to you. Thanks for your time today, and take care.
Thanks so much, Udo. Take care.
You're welcome. My international voice for this November podcast episode was Brigitta Miranda-Freer, the Executive Director of the Montana World Trade Center and the Director of Operations for the Montana Technology Enterprise Center, or short MonTec. Thank you for listening. Those of you who are regularly tuning in to International Voices know being of German descent, I usually end with a German farewell. Dankeschön fürs Zuhören. International Voices is brought to you by Global and Cultural Affairs of Arts Missoula and The Trail 1033. This and previous International Voices podcasts can be found at artsmissoula.org and The Trail 1033.com. If your interests are in global and intercultural education, programming, cultural and global competence and international affairs. We hope you join us in December for the last episode of 2020.